question is, why would you want to take photographs of birds? Everybody has their special reasons. It could be for storing or keeping memories. It could be a professional ornithologist, and so you'd want pictures for publication. I personally do a lot of it for documentation and identification, because when I first started off, I knew very little about birds, and this is one way to identify what I was seeing, because really it's not as simple as this. There's not M birds and Z birds. There's actually over 10,000 different types of birds. And, you know, you want to get pictures like this sometimes. This is a picture that Frank Witowski took of an easternwood pewee with an insect. So there are a lot of cameras, and I'm not going to be able to tell you which camera is best for you. It takes a lot of talking to other people, reading reviews, and deciding what you want your camera to do. And you could have a cell phone, which personally I don't find much use for in birding, but it's good for digiscoping. If somebody has a bird on a scope, you can then maybe get an image off the scope that way, and not have a telephoto lens to do that. You can get a point and shoot pocket-sized camera. It's really good for getting most birds, certainly ones that are stationary. You might have more interest in other than birds, so you might want a camera in which you can interchange lenses for close-ups. If you study lichen or insects, you might want to get closer up, and then you have your telephotos for birds or other wildlife, or even other lenses for scenery. You might even want to have a camera to take underwater with you, because you never know when a penguin's going to swim by. So the big thing now is mirrorless versus digital single lens reflex cameras. Probably most of you know about these types of cameras, but for those who are not quite sure, the digital SLRs, the light comes through the lens on the left here and hits a mirror when you're not taking pictures, goes up through this Pentax mirror or Pentagon mirror and into the optical viewfinder, and that's how you see what you're looking at. When you want to take the picture, the mirror goes up, the light goes straight through to, in the old days, film, but now to a sensor. In the mirrorless, there's no mirror, obviously. The light just comes right through, hits the sensor. The sensor also can send the image to the electronic viewfinder, so you can see what you're seeing, whether you're taking a picture or not. Now, sensor is one of the key aspects of the camera. You know, obviously there's other important parts like the lens. Lens may be the most important part, but typically most of us have cameras that range from the small 1/3.2 to a full frame. And full frame means the size of a previous 35mm film. So where does a camera sensor size come into play? Well, basically, the bigger the sensor, the better low light photography. Although if you're in bright light, smaller sensors will be fine. The more photon capturing pixels per area, the greater the resolution. So in good light, or in any light, the more pixels in general, the better. Okay. There's some references here that you can read more about this, and they'll be in the, when we put it, they'll be available when we put this up on the website. And I'll just go through a few different types of cameras. Here's a point and shoot. It's lightweight, has very good resolution. It has a good 60x optical super zoom lens. It has 18 megapixels, and these prices are between about $300 and $600. The sensor is not on the big side, so it has relatively poor low light capabilities, and it's difficult to get birds in flight. Now, if I'm absolutely wrong about some of these things, we can people can tell me in the discussion how they're using some of these cameras. You can step up in cost to about $1,000 to $2,000 and get another type of point and shoot or a single lens reflex as well that is lightweight, has excellent resolution. This particular camera has 27 to 600 millimeter optical zoom. It doesn't have an interchangeable lens. It has 20 megapixels and so forth. It's got very good real-time magnification. As I said, the price might be too steep for some people. It has a relatively complicated menu. The batteries may, to some, seem not to last as long. And to start it up, it takes 5 seconds or something. So you run the risk of missing the bird. It does capture birds in flight well. You can step up in the next level to a camera that's over $2,000. And you can get, for example, in this Canon EOS R5, full frame, 45 megapixels. It has very good low light capabilities, has extensive video and photographic capabilities, and you can actually use it as a scope for if you put it on a tripod and get excellent 6 or 15x magnification. As I said, it's more expensive, and it also has a complicated menu. And there are cameras that are even more expensive. I mean, it's said over 2,000, but you can get cameras that are 5 or 6 or more thousands of dollars. Same goes with lenses. You can get relatively inexpensive lenses or very expensive lenses. Here's a relatively inexpensive lens for a 800 millimeter lens. It costs less than $1,000, but it has a fixed f-stop of 11. But on the other hand, if you put it with a camera that has really good low light capabilities, that's not such a hassle. But it's large, and because of it's not water sealed, that's one of the cons. You can step up again. Here's a 100 to 400 millimeter Canon RF lens that's got excellent resolution. I'm sorry, 100 to 500, lower f-stop of 4.5, and it's water resistant. Again, it's expensive and it's relatively heavy. Or you could spend over $12,000 for this 100 to 400 Nikon lens, which I assume has excellent resolution, but I've never used one. F4 and is water resistant, and it weighs a ton. But people use this for sports, I know for sure, and also for birding. So I've made a list of some suggestions. These are my personal ideas. You might not agree with them. That's open for discussion, of course, and but these are what I find handy. So I like using a lens hood. They're lightweight. They keep your fingers and other things from touching the glass. Avoids the use of an image degrading lens filter, which probably isn't that much. It helps keep both rain and stray sun rays out. And it makes your lens look more awesome. However, it also makes your lens appear more pretentious. So you have to decide. And you're more likely to clunk someone on the head.
Can you tell us what a lens hood is?
Yes, it's something you attach to the front of the lens, and it's a round cylinder. Let's say it might be a quarter to a third the length of the lens itself, and it's just well, it's like if you took the what could I say? If you took like if you had a small camera and you took the empty toilet paper roll and you cut off the part of it like 2 or 3 inches and stuck it on the end of the lens. That's what the lens hood is. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. I prefer to save my images in RAW format, and Evelyn will talk more about this, but you save more data that way. I think it's important to develop a workflow to process your images. I almost immediately that day, if I can, transfer the images to a computer. I open them up in an imaging processing software, of which there are many types. And I consider the purpose of and composition of my pictures. I crop, the exposure, the color, and other adjustments. And the reason I say I develop a workflow is so that, if you don't get to your pictures right away, they'll just build up and you'll have thousands and thousands of pictures and you may never get them all sorted out if that's your inkling. There it is. Try to get to your images as soon as possible. I've developed my own personal storage and naming conventions. You may not find this useful. You might want to have your own, but I use the first 3 letters of the genus and species, followed by, if there's a 4-letter code, the 4-letter code, followed by the abbreviation for the state or the country. I leave the picture number, and then I put a little abbreviation or something for where I took the picture. So here's an example of a yellow-headed blackbird in my files. You can see I labeled it Zan for the genus and species, followed by the 4-letter code, CA for California, and then the picture number. I took this at Mono Lake, and there was a male and a female in the picture. And the reason why I like to name them this way is if I want to find all the yellow-headed blackbirds that I've taken pictures of, I can just do a sort by Zan, and then I can see all the places I've seen yellow-headed blackbirds, and I can look for particular pictures. And you can sort them by date taken or whatever. And I can't emphasize enough that it's important to learn about your camera's features. When you get a camera, or if you rent a camera to see if you like it, go out in the backyard and take pictures of easy things, things that aren't moving, and see if you can get pictures that you like. And I mentioned that some of the mirrorless cameras now have the ability to use a magnification that's live, and so you can use it almost as a scope. So you can use it as a scope. So here's an example using an 800 millimeter lens that is then going to go through 6x and then 15x magnification. So I'm going from 800 to 4800 to 12,000 millimeters. And you can imagine using this on the Potomac or out west in the open areas. So here it is at 4800. This is a barn, and now at 12,000. So you need to have it on a tripod to actually work with it. Here's the original 800. Okay.
Scott, which camera is this that you're?
So that's the Canon EOS R5. So the July issue of the ABA Birding magazine is all devoted to photography. One of the authors listed these 7 tips for birding: exposure, control exposure, the light, composition, sharpness, the perching of the bird, how he's sitting, where he's sitting, the background, and the pose itself. So I recommend looking at that issue. It's online, and the reference will be later. You can see it online at our website. Also, I would suggest that you research the bird and the location where it is, and often you have to get up early, which we all know. So here's two things, two references I would suggest. They're both online. One is by Matt Felprin. He had a presentation at this year's MOS virtual convention. This is available on YouTube. He entitled it 2020 Year of the Warbler, but he talked about more than the warbler, and he talked about different aspects of photography and post-processing images. And then, as I mentioned, the July issue of Birding is devoted to photography. And if you're lucky, you might catch a picture like this red-billed hornbill catching some food or tossing some food up to eat. Okay, so now I will.
Okay. If I would say if there are any questions that you don't want to hold until I'm done, I would say we can take a few minutes certainly to start some questions. What do you think, Scott?
That's fine.
Any?
Well, one of the advantages for some of us who are getting a bit older for the mirrorless is they're considerably lighter than the digital single lens reflex, which is what I have now. I've been thinking about getting a mirrorless one. So, you know, they are very much lighter.
That's
I
true.
know that a fellow that we went to Madagascar with, Ken Behrens, he's a guide for tropical birding. And when we were in Madagascar, he was carrying around, you know, with a giant 500mm lens with his Nikon, and he's now gone to Olympus mirrorless, and he's very happy with that and prefers it greatly now, particularly carrying things around for hours. So that's another pro that you might not think about, but for us who are getting older, it's a significant one.
Scott, I was looking in the chat just in case there are any questions, and Lisa Shannon disputes the identification of the amber wing.
I was being facetious, but I think that maybe it was something else, but I'm sorry. Like maybe a female synthetrum or something.
I didn't label it. I was just told what it was.
That could only come from you, I think, here.
That's why I thought that would be funny. Anyway, it was a great picture.
Yeah, and Francesca was asking what is low light. Well, that means if, you know, a sunny day with blue sky is bright light. Low light is, you know, clouds, or you're in the middle of a forest. So that's, you know, it's all relative.
It could be dawn or dusk, you know, it depends on your camera.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I've been reading a lot about these, and that's the thing they always say is that's the disadvantage in low light. And it's kind of like, well, most of the time when I'm walking along the towpath, am I in low light? Probably not. Most of the time when I'm in the maintenance yard, or, I mean, I'm just wondering, you know, how often do you really find that the light is insufficient? I mean, obviously I don't want to take a picture of a nighthawk at midnight or an owl at 3 a.m. But I mean, really and truly, you know, I don't know. Is that really a huge thing, or could you get away with it?
You know, both Scott and I mean, I'll start responding to that one. Scott, of course, is it's the end of your talk. Scott and I were both on a trip to Arizona at the end of July, which is the season of the monsoon in Arizona. And the first 2 days it was raining nonstop. And we were at some point in a forest and it was raining. So it was good to have actually water resistant lenses, and really low light, you know, that was really low light too. So when you travel, you start taking photographs where you are, and you don't choose the weather on that day. So
a rainy day is really low enough light that you're going to be disappointed in that camera.
Depends on what your standards are for your pictures, really. If you're happy with your pictures, then that's fine.
Well,
Right.
I mean, I just want to be able to confirm IDs and learn more. And I have no interest in pretty pictures, honestly. I'm sorry. Please
But-
don't be insulted.
No,
But
no, no.
I just want to carry something light that is going to help me later on when I think, gosh, was that an olive-sided flycatcher?
Well, yeah, I've looked into some of this just a little. And well, Gail McKiernan mentioned one thing that's really important as far as I'm concerned, and that's the weight.
Mm.
And it's not just a question of the weight of the camera itself. Something like the Canon mirrorless requires a lens attached to it. And even the 800mm that Scott's been using, but that's not too bad. But let me ask a quick question. I just wonder how easy it is to find a small bird at a great distance, say a red-eyed vireo in a green tree with an 800mm lens. I wonder if you can do that in real time.
Yes.
But also one other thing with these cameras, I don't think any camera is going to satisfy everything. They're either too expensive, or they're too heavy, or they don't give you enough zoom, or they don't have enough pixels. You know, I've got, well, I think it's the same camera Scott has used sometimes, and that's this Sony RX10 Mark IV. And overall, it really works quite well. Perfect? No way. But for a sort of ordinary mortal and an aging one like me, it really works pretty well. I'd love to get a DSLR or a mirrorless with, say, the Canon 100 to 500mm lens, but I don't think I could pick it up. So it wouldn't do me much good.
I think it's also around. I mean, I've also got one of those super zoom cameras, a Lumix, like you showed, a different model. But I mean, mainly the pictures I take are of insects, and so that works for me. You know, I don't, and I've got a short attention span, so I don't want to figure out how to operate something that has 18 lenses, and I have to figure out exactly what setting it is and all that business.
Yeah.
So, you know, also take that into account, like how much do you like playing with technical things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's one of the things that Scott said at the very beginning. I think it's really important. You really have to decide what you want the camera for. If you want wonderful pictures of sitting ducks, that's one thing. If you want the great pictures of fleeting warblers, that's another. And do you want to have prints that you hang on your wall, or do you want to have prints that get published in National Geographic?
I had the same camera that Frank has, the Sony, and I had a Lumix before, which I liked because it was the FX. Oh, I forget what 30, but it was a step up from the one I think that Scott had, which was lighter, and I liked it. But the thing that, and I'm interested in small birds, warblers, and various passerines, and the sensor on that camera was not big enough. That's why I went to the Sony, was because has a much bigger sensor. So when I'm shooting at the maximum, you know, magnification for that camera, the 600, I get a much more detailed picture. So when I blow it up, if the bird's far away, then I still get an identifiable image that I can use and I can refer to and things like that. So for me, that was what was important, was being able to see a blow up of a small bird at some distance from where I was shooting.
One thing about that, maybe Evelyn will address this with that camera. I think many of you will feel I should get my mouth washed out with soap if I say this, but that camera, I think many now have sort of 2 degrees of digital zoom, intelligent or clear image zoom, and regular digital zoom. And I think the Sony's clear image zoom, that'll take the magnification to 1200 from 600, really works pretty well. I haven't done a real test, but I can hardly see any difference. So I don't know, Evelyn, did you see, I sent a question regarding cropping versus, I sent it by email, cropping versus digital zoom. And I don't know what is a better approach. And it's particularly if you've got a little bird and you've taken it with a 600mm at maximum optical zoom, and to see it, you have to crop it a lot. If you use the digital zoom, you may not have to crop it or crop it a lot less. So I don't know what the difference is in.
So I think that if I'm understanding you correctly, the difference is whether you want the camera to crop the picture while you're taking it, or whether you want to take the regular larger image and then crop it afterwards in a software program. You're going to get the same data, I think.
That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. I just don't know enough about the physics and the optics.
Sorry, Frank, I would say I also have a Sony, but I use it very rarely now. I thought that the digital zoom on the Sony added a lot of noise, a lot of strange looking noise to the images. So I did not use it, and I preferred to crop the images. But anyway, that's a question of, you know, really, I think that we should say that everyone, you know, has their goal and what they like, and there's more and more that you can do with image processing afterwards, also to, you know, to make the image certainly clear enough. And I will show some images in low light, which are not so good, but which you can improve at least to make them satisfying for identifying a bird. And yeah, that's.
I just wanted to, let me mention one more thing about the modern mirrorless cameras, and I don't know if all cameras can do this, but I'm aware of some that normally wouldn't have great low light capabilities because they have a smaller sensor, for example, but they have AI so that it will take, say, 3 rapid shots of what you're pointing at, and then somehow within the camera, it's able to merge those 3. So you're actually getting 3 times the amount of light, and the pictures are really pretty good in terms of how they put those together. So that's one of the ways that they can get around the low light. It's pretty impressive.
When we were in Madagascar, a friend of ours who was with us, Greg Anderson, is into spiders, and he has a very small camera that takes 3 images. If you're taking a picture of a very small object like a spider or an insect, it takes 3 photographs slightly, you know, sandwiched, so to speak. So you're getting a sharp focus of the entire insect. And I think it's an Olympus camera. It looks like a little point and shoot, but it's specifically for taking pictures of very tiny things. So people who are interested in that might want to look into it. And I can find out what it was. I just can't recall it right at the moment.
Sorry, I can't prevent myself from saying this is like confocal microscopy in science, where you take optical slices of very tiny things.
Evelyn, this is Mike Bowman. I'd like to ask you, because you're a super photographer, what equipment you use, what equipment Scott uses, what equipment Ed Picazzi uses, and Dave Roberts too, and why. I mean, that's a fair number of people, but I think you use different cameras.
Right now, Scott and I have the same bodies. We both have the Sony, but with I think slightly different opinions of that. We both have the Canon R5. I'm using the 100 to 500 millimeter lens. They're coming now with a very light 100 to 400 millimeter, and I will and that's a very for these things very inexpensive lens, and I will most likely buy it, because for traveling when I go somewhere where I'm not going to be birding from morning to evening, 10 days in a row, I would like to have something that's a bit lighter.
Yeah.
So, and I really like the R5 very much, and 100 to 500 also. I would prefer it if it were a lot lighter, but as long as I can still carry it, I'll continue.
So I have the same camera that Frank and Karen mentioned, the Sony RX10 Model 4. It's got a Zeiss lens. It goes from 27 to 600, and it's light. It takes really good pictures. I think it has that capability I mentioned about the AI to get 3 images. It's got different settings. I've taken pictures of stars and moons handheld, and it works really well. So when I'm in the woods or where I expect the birds are going to be close, that's the camera I use. When I'm out in the open, I use my R5 with the 800. But as I can actually get on, as Frank asked, I can actually get on small birds with that, but they have to be 20 feet away or more for it to be in focus. So that's why I can only use it out in the open. I also have a very tiny point and shoot that I have in my glove compartment, because when I'm driving around and if I see something and I don't have any of my camera equipment with me, I can pull that out. It's like $100 thing or something, and I can pull it out and take pictures of it.
Cameras.
Those are the 3 cameras I use.
And actually, I would like to add, and Lisa might be interested in that, is that the Sony, I think, is very good for macro. And I got interested in lichens and moss a while back. And you can have the lens practically touching the top of the moss when you take a photograph. So that's really very good.
Ed or Dave?
Well, I've been in the Nikon world for 40 some years, so I guess it's mostly out of habit. I stay with Nikon instead of Canon. And my camera itself is getting dated, and probably I'll move to a mirrorless next time. I'm a fan of fixed focus lenses, of having not a zoom, because I find any zoom lens that I've used, if I really try to crop the image and look in detail, there are always optical imperfections that you don't see in the fixed focal length lenses. So I think in terms of if I'm taking a picture of something that's very far away, and I have to crop it a lot, I end up with a better quality by having a fixed focus lens. And also, relative to what Scott said about not being able to focus close, I'm shooting at 400 millimeters, and I can take pictures of spiders and insects 4 feet away and end up with an image on the sensor, which is close to the size of the insect I'm taking a picture of. So you can use it as a macro. And as Evelyn said, that sometimes for macro, it's nice to get really close, but if it's an insect that's shy or something else which would be hostile if you get close to it, having a 400 millimeter lens, I can be 4 feet away and not endanger myself or my subject. So I'm a fan of that lens.
It's good.
I think thinking about what Scott's shooting at 800 millimeters, it's the same trade-off as in binoculars, that if you have a wide field, low magnification binocular, it's easier to track a moving bird and get on it. And if you buy 12 or 15x binoculars, you have better magnification if your subject's not moving. But if it's moving around, as warblers always do, the longer the focal length, the harder it is to get yourself on the subject you're trying to photograph.
Is Ed Vigezzi still on the
Am I?
meeting?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so I use a Canon EOS 60D, but I just purchased a Canon EOS 90D. I had a Tamron 150 600 millimeter lens that I carried around for a long time, but as I got older, it's just way too heavy. So I have a 400 millimeter Canon EF lens, and I find the clarity on that to be so much better and able to crop. So I've been using that for about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months now. And I laughed because Scott mentioned earlier about having a process. I had a process got behind. I'm sitting here looking, I probably have 4,000 photos that are sitting out there right now that I have to go through. So it you know, it's, as much as you try, it just hasn't, you know, it hasn't worked. Those are the lenses I use. I you know, I still stick with a Canon, and I like it. But to me, I've learned to get out of the into the manual settings. And Scott mentioned Matt Felprin. I hired him for 3 hours to take me out to Huntley Meadows and teach me how to use my camera. So that's the way I learned. And that was done in March of this year.
Thank you all.
You're welcome.
So want to move on to your presentation?
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to talk about software that will allow you to remedy your images if they have problems, and also to deal with a certain number, with large numbers of photos. So I wrote this. I have just shot 800 photos, I should say, in the last 10 minutes. Now, what do I do? And this is not really a joke, because I recently thought that I should use the capacities of the R5 to take photographs rather rapidly. And this was a ruby-throated hummingbird. I was actually sitting in my kitchen, and the hummingbird was on near the feeder just outside. So I knew exactly where it was getting perched, and then it would kind of look right, look left, and eventually, you know, move or go to the feeder. And so there's only a fraction of a second between these shots. And I was not realizing that my finger was a bit heavy on the shutter. And so suddenly I stopped, and I had taken 800 photos. Fortunately, there were many hundreds of these that I could immediately delete because they were not interesting or not good. And this is one thing that I would suggest, and that I always try to do, is that when I get back from a walk, from a morning during a trip, I look at all the photos and immediately delete those that are completely out of focus, or that I can see immediately when I have a good photo of a bird. If I have 100 other photos of that bird that are really mediocre and will not bring me anything, I try to delete them. So I then don't have as many photos to deal with later. But let's see what we can do. So, you know, the digital photos are a little bit like the negatives of film photography. So for those of you who, like me, may still remember what it was like to take photos on film, you would expose the film, you would then develop it into a negative, and you would then take a roll of negatives to a nearby, at least in my case, to a nearby shop and get them printed. Unless you had your own darkroom, it was very difficult to get some modification of the printing so that a dark photo could be improved, or a light photo could be a little bit more vivid. So with digital photography, actually, your computer is now your darkroom. So you can do a lot of things that you could not do with film photography. And of course, you can do thousands of photos when you would have done 24 or 36 ones, and not feel that you had, of course, there's a bigger investment in the beginning, but I remember when I felt bad because I had to pay for 36 photos for the development, and they were not good. So let me say just 2 words about the format of the image files. Scott mentioned raw image files. Most cameras, most digital cameras will allow you to shoot in two modes, either raw image files or JPEGs. When you shoot in raw, the image file contains really all the information that the photo contains. There's no compression, there's no change whatsoever. And you will be able to modify about all aspects of the image afterwards. When you take a JPEG, it could be a lot easier if you don't want to spend any time afterwards, because the camera is going to guess to some degree what you would like the photo to look like. So it will look a little bit sharper. It will look more vivid than if you have a raw image. But what you can do afterwards is a little bit more limited. The question of choice. So the software that I use is Adobe Lightroom. Adobe is the brand. They also make Photoshop and a lot of other software. Lightroom is a software that's, I will explain, I will not get into a lot of details about how it works. Just say it contains several modules in addition to the library, which allows you to import and export your files, but also importantly to rate them, to flag them, to annotate them, to put keywords. And then you have develop, which allows you to do everything else you want to do. It has these other modules that I very, very rarely use. So what I like about Lightroom, which I started using quite a number of years ago, is that it's really geared towards photography. It is intuitive. I won't say that it's not complex sometimes, but it is intuitive. The image changes while you just move a little slider with your mouse. So that's very gratifying. And the original image is conserved. It doesn't work, it doesn't change the image itself. And the history of the image from the original one to the one you're going to export is kept intact. So these are features that I like a lot. I completely agree again with Scott about the necessity to organize your photos. But my organization is completely different from his, which is quite funny, because in my very large picture folder, this is just a little piece, as he showed as well. I organize them by dates. I like to keep the photos that I took at, let's say, Cabin John on May 1st, Hughes Hollow on May 2nd, together. I have something mentioned about the place and occasionally about a bird. I think that, for example, Ed will remember, and many of you will remember the anhinga that was at Hughes Hollow in early May. So one thing that's important, it's important to organize your photos, and it's important to think about that when you start. And not to change it along the way, because the software, at least in the case of Lightroom, the software wants to find the same folder at the same place anytime you want to reopen it. So if at some point you decide to change your organization, it's not impossible, but it will make your life more difficult, at least for a while. Okay, so once you have organized, you have your folder of photos, you have loaded up to your computer, you're going to import it into your software, Lightroom here, and then you're going to do the development. So I'm going to show you a few examples of what you can do. And for example, Francesca was asking what's not enough light, and you will see I have a photo in the beginning that's too dark and that's noisy. And you have all circumstances. Everything can be too dark or too bright, regardless of the settings that you use. So let me start by a picture that's too dark. This was taken at Little Bennett in the woods, and that was actually taken a few years ago. So this picture is too dark. I don't know if you see that there is a bird there. The bird is on the left side of this arrow, and it's actually an ovenbird. Now you can make the picture brighter, and you can crop it. That already improves the situation. And if all you want is to have a picture to help you identify the bird, I had some other photos that were actually not as dark, and where you could see the nice line that you have, the nice triple line that you have on the top of the head of the ovenbird. But this one doesn't have it, but anyway. But this photo is not very satisfying because it has a lot of noise, a consequence of having had very little light when I was shooting the photo. So you can improve the image quality. And here you can see what you can, sorry. This is actually showing what I did to get to this picture. This is a little part of my screen in Lightroom. You can see these sliders. I increased the exposure. I didn't do anything with these other sliders. And here is the cropping tool, which I used. So that takes a few seconds to do this. Then I reduced the noise. I don't know if you can see the picture is getting a bit better. And then I exported the image, and you get, this is a window that gives you the history of this image. You can see that it was imported in September 2017, actually nearly exactly 4 years ago. Then the image was cropped, the exposure changed a bit. I kind of removed some sharpening that I had done 4 years ago. And I worked on the luminance. That's what the luminance, how to say, irregularities was the cause for the background. You had pixels that looked white and others that looked green, and that gives the noise of the image. So that's an image that you could then export and that you could keep as a memory or identification of your bird. However, you may want the image to be less noisy than this or than what I obtained with Lightroom. And there is some new software. There is always some new software, of course, but I don't know if you often open eBird, you will see that the photos that are showing that are shown in eBird are always of extremely good quality. And of course, I don't doubt that they are all taken by excellent photographers, but you can see that they have very little background. And I'm sure that some of the software, as I'm going to show you here, is being used by Cornell Labs. The software here, which I heard about through Scott, who heard about it through the talk by Matt Felprin, which I unfortunately missed, is Topaz. Topaz denoise from Topaz Labs. It's more recent than the Adobe software, but it goes very well with the Adobe software. So you don't need to open two different programs. You just use denoise from inside Lightroom. And you can see that the background is a lot smoother and the bird now starts to be really sharp and to come out of the background. So that is why perhaps these days having a camera that's not so good in low light is not a catastrophe, because you can still get fairly decent photos. Okay, so now the next case shows, you know, in books or tutorials, they recommend that you find a place where to go, where you know exactly where the birds are, you know where the sun is, and you can position yourself so that the bird is looking in the sun and you're not looking into the sun. It's not always possible, as I'm sure that all of you know. And this is a barred owl that kindly perched not too far from where I was, but unfortunately with the sun behind it. And even if you want your camera to measure the light, to measure the light on the bird, if you have a bird that takes small amount of space on the sensor and is surrounded by a very bright sky, the sensor is going to be fooled to some degree by the brightness of the sky. But you have another of these sliders called shadows. And when you use the shadows, you see that you can get a very nice photo of this bird where you now really can recognize the barred owl, see its face and its eyes, which I like very much. So that's another something else that one can do. So now this is an example of the opposite problem. This is a photo that I knew was saturated, overexposed, really not very good. This is a great blue heron that was flying at Wheaton during the summer. Once again, you can change, you can decrease. In this case, I decreased the exposure of the whole photo because the whole photo was too bright, but also was called the highlights. And that really now makes the contrast between the primary feathers and the secondary covered be be visible, which it was not before. And then you could crop the photo, you could maybe turn the bird a little bit if you want, anyway, and do what you want with it, but that's better. So, and then the last example that I will show you, and here I decided to show, I wanted to show you a larger part of my computer screen when I'm working with Lightroom. This is not the whole thing, but anyway, it's obviously the bird, some basic information on the top left here, the image file number and the parameters that you used in the photograph, and then to the right, all the basic changes that you can do, and then you can go lower, there are more. Here, actually, this is not, let's see, this is the photo I wanted to start with. And you can see that this is considerably yellower than the following one. I had a problem, I think, with the white balance. The white balance is something that you set up in the camera. And most of the time, I set up my white balance as auto. So it means that the camera how to say, analyzes the light and deals with it on its own. The white balance is responsible, or how to say, a correct white balance is what allows you to see as white something that you photograph and that you know is white. Daisy, a bird that has a white belly, etc. You like it to be white, although we know that depending on the time of the day, the light color changes. This photo was taken about 2 weeks ago. I was with Lydia Schindler and Chris Wright, and we were at the end of Sycamore Landing Road. And we were lucky there were a lot of birds and quite a few Cape May warblers. It was really wonderful. It was still early in the morning. A red sun was rising, and I think that certainly contributed to the yellow. But I had a setup in the white balance of my camera, which is okay for many photos, but not always. And the white balance appears here. You can see WB and S shot, and when changing it to WB auto, what the software does is that it changes the image as if the image had been shot with the auto white balance. And this is something that you can do with a raw format image, but you cannot do with a JPEG image. And in this case, I was happy that I was able to do it. You can see that the colors of the bird, fortunately, have not changed, because if they change, that would be, of course, very bizarre. So that is the use of, I think that these are the examples that I have showing you what you can do with software that's that's geared toward photography.
And what is the software that you use again?
Lightroom, in one word, from Adobe. So one thing is that when you see the whole screen, you have a strip of photos that appears at the bottom. And that you can see immediately how you rate and flag the photos. For example, you can give them some stars. Here I do like these photos. I gave it 4 stars, and sometimes I just very quickly give my photos 0 or 1 stars, and that's 1 I will keep and 0 I delete. But you can also give them, for example, you see this green color versus a red frame. For me, the green frame means this photo is ready for export. The red one means something else. It doesn't really matter. But it really allows you to know, just by looking at these photos, just looking at this strip, I will have 100 photos and I can go from left to right. I can also click on one little area and I will immediately select all the photos, for example, that are green, or all the photos that have a star or no star. And that makes it a lot easier to deal with hundreds of photographs.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry, sure.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
This is Julia. So can we go back to the original JPEG and RAW thing? Is that a feature you're using when you take the photo? That's not how you're storing it, correct?
Correct. That's a feature in general. When let's say you have your camera, it's new, or you have perhaps not looked at that. The camera in general has a menu, and it will let you decide on a few choices. And one of them would be whether you want to shoot your photos as RAW or as JPEGs. Sometimes you can also do the two, but the JPEGs are smaller. So having a RAW and JPEG together is not going to make it and to make them enormous, but nevertheless it will take more memory.
Are your photos in RAW?
Yes. I always take them.
Thank you.
Very occasionally, if I go somewhere and I'm going to do family photos and my cousins' grandsons or something like that, I may do JPEGs, because I'm not probably going to start processing them very much. And then I might as well do it in a simple way. And also, yeah. Anyway, thank you. You're welcome. So rating and flagging the photos, and also you can add keywords, which I have to confess I do not do so often. which I sometimes regret. But that's it. So now I just want to say just a very few words about where's the limits, because with that software you can do a lot of changes to a photo. This landscape, which looks a bit strange and which frankly I don't like very much, is the splash photo. That's what you see when you open the software Lightroom. And you probably know that Photoshop, which is also made by Adobe, and which is an extremely powerful software, has sometimes a bad reputation, because people will say, oh, did you Photoshop this? Did you remove someone you didn't like from the photo with Photoshop? Did you add the bird or something like that? So because you can do a lot of things with Photoshop, and not so many with Lightroom, but nevertheless, you can do things that are not necessarily what I would consider ethical. So I don't want to enter into the details of this, but I think that for me, the notion is that one should not alter the characteristics of the bird. You don't want to change the color of a cardinal into a blue bird, or to change an indigo bunting into a red bird. You don't want to alter its location. For example, I don't think that you want to make a mask and kind of pick a bird from a photo and put it on a photo that was taken somewhere else. And you really don't want to add or remove specific features. You can make the photo lighter, darker, whatever, but in general, do not really make it into something that's completely let's see, imaginary, fantasy, unless what you want to do with it is really some art, and you do not care truly about whether you represent a real bird or not. But if you're going to use it as documentation for seeing a bird, I think that there are some limits. And so my recommendations at the end is take many photos, but then delete some, enjoy it, and back up. Don't forget to back up. Catastrophes may happen to computers and to your photos. And that's it. Sorry. I wanted to say, so I very much like the photo of the hornbill that Scott showed us, that was taken in Namibia. This is a white ibis that I encountered in St. Augustine. And one of the reasons why I encourage everyone to take a lot of pictures is that gives you more chance that the bird is going to suddenly do something that's interesting or funny, or that will reveal some feature that you have not seen before. So that's it for my presentation. And so now.
What was the white ibis eating?
I have no idea. and I swear that I did not add it to the photo, and that it's not something that I threw to the bird. It was, it was on a boardwalk in that place in St. Augustine that's called, it's a crocodile farm or alligator farm. So, maybe a candy that a kid had left, who knows?
Yeah, that's what it looks like, one of those little.
Yeah. There may be questions on the chat. I think that there are. Let's see. Let's see. Where did we? Okay, that was the rarity questions. Then, what is low light?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't see any
Dan
question.
Oberzut said animal eye detection autofocus is really great on mirrorless cameras, and that's absolutely true. And also not only the animal eye detection, but the tracking. That's what I was using for these sequences of hummingbird photos, and it's really great. Then Ed said that he uses the Canon 90D and the 400mm lens. Marcy Harrison asked, is anyone digiscoping? Can you get good photos if your smartphone has a good camera? I personally do very little digiscoping because I'm not good with it. And so I get no good photos. Scott?
My impression is that you get a photo that looks decent if you don't try to blow it up. So as soon as you expand it a little bit, it's very grainy. But
Can I ask a question about eBird and photographs?
sure.
If we take pictures that are so-so that we want to use for identification and add them as media into eBird, and then we decide, I don't really need to keep this picture. It proved that I saw the X bird, but I don't really want to save it for posterity. I can delete it from my files. It's in Macaulay if they want to keep it, but I'm absolved if I delete it from my files, aren't I?
Yeah, no, you don't have to keep the picture. You can put it in, I do that a lot. I put a picture in eBird and then I don't like the picture and I don't save it. I often go through on a whim and just pick a bird, and I go through all the pictures I have of it and throw half of them away because they're not as good as my more recent ones or something like that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That clears my conscience.
And your name is associated with it in the Macaulay library because it was you entered that photo, so no one is going to criticize you for not having it on your computer anymore.
And you're also stuck with it for life.
Yeah.
Well, you can get rid of it. You can get rid of it on eBird too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, by deleting the media. That's true.
Yeah. And then Ed Vijayzi and Stella T both said that they organized their photos by date and location. Like me, I'm very gratified. Thank you. But Lisa, I always use auto white balance too, because I used to find myself having taken 200 photos in the field accidentally on incandescent, and they would all be blue. Were they raw or were they JPEGs?
They were raw, but still.
Yeah. Okay. And Stella liked to use the previous option in Lightroom to copy the settings. She used one photo to other ones, especially when I have a bunch of photos. Yes, that's right. You can, it's previous or preset, Stella. That may be what you mean. There are some presets. So you know your cameras, and if you think that your cameras maybe underexposes a little bit, you can tell Lightroom that when it opens the photos, it should immediately maybe change the exposure just a little bit, and you can do some changes that you will not have to do for each photo. It will do it systematically. It will apply it systematically to all the photos you import. Good point, Stella. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that tip. I have not used presets. Definitely something to look into, because there are always photos that can be improved. I've only used a previous. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So speaking of presets, I mean, I have my camera, I can set, I guess, 3 for still photography and 3 for video photography. And so one of my presets is just for taking pictures of still birds, and it's got a certain, I set it 1 stop over normal, and it's got a certain range of speeds. And then I have another preset, and it has a very narrow focus. And then I have another preset where I have a really wide focus with 2 f-stops, and I use that to catch birds in flight because they're usually in the sky. I want to be able to capture them with the wide focus area and bring out the dark bird against the sky. So those are the kind of presets you can set as well on some of the cameras.
Cheryl says, I have a phone scope adapter for my phone. I've gotten some nice shots through my scope. The phone
Nice.
scope is the square thing that attaches to the
lens,
to the scope, yeah, to the lens of the
to
scope.
the eyepiece. Yeah, I've used that too, and I agree. If you don't have a high-powered telephoto camera, and you want to get a picture of the bird and it's in a scope, that's going to be a really good way to do it.
Yeah, Cheryl is showing us. And can you, yeah.
This part goes into the lens of the scope.
Mm-hmm.
And a tip I got from I guess it was a scope guy at a bird festival. He said, don't use the phone scope app, which I have on my phone, and I really had trouble with it, but just use your phone's own camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I had much greater success. It doesn't help you if you're doing moving birds, but if you have a bird, waterfowl is a great example, or just something that's sitting there, it can
Mm-hmm.
really be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sharon. Jim Ivets, are there benefits or detriments to using exposure compensation rather than Lightroom? You mean exposure compensation in the camera?
Yeah.
I use both, but sometimes if it's really dark or too bright, and I find that sometimes I'm not completely happy with the exposure compensation if it's more than 1 + 1 or -1. The exposure compensation, for those who don't know, is generally there's one knob somewhere that you can turn, and then you can tell. For the case when I was showing this barred owl that was too dark because the sun was behind it, I could have increased the exposure light, but then so in terms of potential disadvantage is that, for example, if you have a blue sky, if you and the bird that's against the sky, if you use this exposure compensation, everything is going to be lighter, and your sky will end up being maybe a bit white or whatever. Some people say that a white sky is the kiss of death for a photo. I don't, you get the sky, whatever it is, when you take that photo. But when you do the Lightroom shadow, you increase the shadows, then it doesn't change, or changes very little of the sky or of what's not really in the shade.
Yeah, that's something I've been trying to understand, is exposure compensation, because when I look at a picture, take a picture like the barred owl, it's very dark, and at the time you take it, you wonder if in fact you're going to be able to pull out the light.
Yeah.
I don't use
Yeah.
Lightroom right now.
Yeah.
I'm using Adobe Elements, which isn't quite as sophisticated, but I have to also admit that I've been taking JPEGs. I won't be taking those anymore. Thank you.
You're welcome. Actually,
still learning.
that's one thing. I don't know if it's the R5, but I have been impressed by the amount of color that is kind of stored in the image, even when you don't see it at first. And that's Lydia.
Yeah.
Lydia kindly says, amazingly interesting for a non-photographer, which I'm sure, Scott, this is we'll both be very happy about that. Francesca has a question about color. Francesca, you want to?
Yeah, it was a little complicated to type into the chat. I've been with people in the field where we've looked at a bird, thought we saw what we saw, took the photograph, and then looked at the photograph, and the color was like, there's a yellow wash where you swear you didn't see a yellow wash. And I guess, how do you know which one's right? What you thought you saw, or was it something about the light and the way the camera captured it that made something stand out that actually wouldn't have stood out? I don't know. I just wonder if it's your imagination. I mean, they say that your eyes want to see what they want to see, but on the other hand, photos don't lie. But maybe there's something about the way it's captured that does lie.
You could see if it's the setup of the camera, for example, like the way I had my white balance, I can take a photo of a white wall and see what color it has. So you can afterwards, having kind of the same setting in your camera, you can take a photo of something and see what it looks like.
It's like a control.
Yeah,
kind of.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then my second question is just,
Let me add something to that.
Sure.
You know, your brain is an incredible computer, and your visual processing will do all sorts of AI, if you want to call it that, on what you're seeing. And you will see, you won't see the owl as dark, perhaps. You might see it well, and the sky will look fine. The camera is actually taking what's really true. You've just processed it in your own mind. So it's neither one's fault. It's just the way it works.
Yeah, no, I've seen it so many times where it's like, wait, I swear to God, that's not what I saw. And then you look at the photo and there it is, a yellow wash on the breast that was just not there or something like that. My other question is, I don't want to take a lot of time from people, but if anybody has suggestions for a $400 to $600 camera that doesn't weigh much, that will take good enough pictures to document a sighting for eBird and will be grainy and low light, but I'm willing to invest in the Adobe to work on that. But I'm not willing to carry a big lens. It's too heavy, it's too much, and I'm not good at learning complicated stuff. So if anybody's got suggestions, you want to just type them in the chat, that would be awesome. I don't want to take up everybody's time.
I would suggest doing something like going to a B&H photo website or Amazon or Colorama and look at the cameras in that price range and then look at the comments about them.
I've done that. And I tell you, one of the things that I find extremely frustrating, and maybe some of you can help me with this, is where can you go that they have a big selection that they're willing to take out of the box and let you actually play with? Because I've just found so many places are like, well, no, we have it in stock, but you can't touch it. You can't look at it. It has to, it's just, I've found it very frustrating. I've called, 5 or 6 camera shops in the area and Best Buy, and I can't find anywhere that actually has the Nikon one and the Canon one that I want to compare.
What about ANS? ANS might have the Audubon Natural Society.
Oh, do they? I didn't even know they had cameras.
No, they do not. They have binoculars.
Yeah, I knew they had scopes and binoculars.
Francis,
the Rockville Best Buy is pretty good for cameras.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think it's the pandemic supply chain issues that they just don't have much.
The best place is probably B&H, but it's in New York.
Yeah, if I go to, I've bought cameras there many decades ago, but I haven't been in a while.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if Chris, are you still around with us? Because Chris likes District Camera, which is I think in Arlington, and I think that they have. I once looked at their website, and people said something like, that they're very helpful.
I bought my camera there, and there was a birder who just really helped me. And I bought a Power Shot DX80 or something like that. I can put that in the chat or
thank you.
Let people know.
There's also a place in Ashburn, which I went to on the recommendation of a colleague. That's where I bought my camera, and they were super, super helpful. Unfortunately, I'm not remembering the name of it right now, but it's out there in Ashburn.
That rings a bell, but
it was fantastic. It was.
I called them, and they were so rude.
Really? Oh,
yes.
man.
And I said, I see you have this in stock and this in stock. Will I be able to compare it? Oh, no, you can't take those out of the box.
Wow. I guess the nice people quit after I bought my camera.
Well, or maybe it's just the pandemic supply thing again. I don't want to, but I do know that place. I did find that place online, and I actually was all excited about driving out there and planned the outing and the whole 9 yards. And then I thought, well, let me just call them before I get in the car. And
God, I'm glad you did.
Francesca, there is a place that I like a lot, which is called Lens Rentals. They're in Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not sure that they have a lot of choice in the lower cost cameras, unfortunately. But they're very good. You can rent things for 2 days, 3 days, 1 week. They're always on time. The equipment is very good quality, very well packed. They give you the packing and the label for returning it when time is due. And the price of the rental is proportional to the price of buying the camera. So if you want something that's not too expensive, it will not be too expensive to test it. But it would probably be difficult to test, several ones at the same time to compare them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's helpful. LENS, Lens?
Lens Rentals, one word. I can send. I can send you the.
No, I'll find it. That's great. Thank you.
Let me mention that all mentions of camera products, stores, software is not endorsed one way or another by the Montgomery Bird Club. These are all personal opinions.
Very good. Very good.
Yes, and much appreciated. Thank you.
Gail, you have a question?
You're muted. Oh, no,
you're muted.
I don't know.
Let's
no,
see.
you're still muted.
I'll try. Everyone is muted.
There.
Okay.
I was on full screen and for some reason I couldn't find my. Well, another thing you can do just to get a general idea of what the cameras are is to talk to people in the field who are using them. I mean, lift it up, see how much it weighs, ask about the use of it, see if you like a super zoom, one of the smaller cameras, or you want to get a digital single lens reflex with the lenses, that sort of thing. But it's the same thing with binoculars. Go and talk to people and they'll let you look through the viewfinder and so forth.
Yep. Well, Frank may remember me when he was looking at the wood stork. I was asking him about his camera.
Yeah.
Although with the not completely finished pandemic, some people may be very resistant to you touching their camera.
Actually, I haven't found that to be true because I've been looking at, mirrorless and I'm saying, can I lift it? And I said, oh yeah, sure, here. Yeah. So
good. Thank you. I will do more of that.
Let me see. Janet Millenson. By the way, I noticed that several of our chapter's new members are with us this evening. Welcome. We're glad you've joined. And this is true. Thank you, Janet. I forgot to ask specifically when we first started who was new, although there were so many faces that I know well that those were not new. Julia Porter, who is a new member and who we saw. I don't know, Julia. I don't know if you're a member, but it doesn't matter. At least you're with us. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm new. Yes, okay. And this was wonderful. Need to go. If you want to reach out, and she gives her email address, which I will copy. So that is great. Stella T says, thank you, Evelyn and Scott, for your presentation and great photography tips. Nathan and I have to drop. See you later. Yeah, Nathan is now a senior, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. Ed, festivals may have exhibitions where you can test cameras. Cape May coming up in October. Yeah. I have no idea whether.
I went into a place that was just outside of Philadelphia, had a huge exhibition, and they had a whole section set up with binoculars and cameras. They may not do that now because of the pandemic, but
yeah,
you can always check and see with the people that are running the that's there.
Yeah.
A lot of optics.
Good idea.
I'm going to say goodbye now. So bye-bye. I have to.
Goodbye, game. And you know, one thing I would say, there are tons on the internet. If you Google such and such camera review, you will see tons of reviews for cameras.
Yeah.
It's a bit frustrating because you will, get one review that thinks that that camera is the best thing on earth, and another one that says that it's terrible. And you never know whether these are completely, independent reviews or not. But at least you have a lot of tutorials, and you can see maybe people show how to use it, and you can see if it looks very complicated or not. That's already one thing.
I want to chime in from Ed's comment. I was recently at a bird festival. Oh, they let you handle things. They have tubs of sanitary wipes, so they wipe the equipment off after you've used it.
I'd like to mention that a website called DP Reviews.
Yeah.
D as in dog, P as in Paul, dpreviews.com has, I think, really objective and good reviews of cameras.
I was just about to mention them too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the lens rentals. I really want to have it in my hand. I really want to, play with it. That's a really great tip.
Yeah. And Francesca, if you want something not too expensive, you can also look places like B&H has second-hand lenses. I have once bought a second-hand lens. And a year later, I sold it back to them because I realized that I didn't use it that much. There's also Adorama. They also have second-hand lenses. And B&H and Adorama have in general the same kind of prices, exactly the same prices for the lenses. There are a couple of places when you look online for lens or camera prices, you may find one or two places that have much cheaper prices, but be careful because there are some that are predatory and that are not to be trusted.
Yeah, B&H has been around forever.
B&H and Adorama have been around. Yeah, I don't think that you can find really less if it's for a new camera.
Right. Yeah, they're great. All right. Next time you see me in the field, I may have a camera.
Good luck. Good luck.
Great. Best wishes.
Thank you all. Take care, everybody. Have a good
Okay. You're welcome.
Bye.